Hello, I'm Alma Angeles, and you're watching Eagle News International. On tonight's headlines.
I'm here to announce
the hardline Islamist Taliban celebrated their total return to power with gunfire and diplomacy after the last U.S. troops flew out of Afghanistan to end 2 decades of war. Rescuers combed through the catastrophic damage Hurricane Ida did to Louisiana a day after the fierce storm killed at least 2 people, stranded others in rising floodwaters, and sheared the roofs of homes. Thousands of people are ordered to evacuate as a huge wildfire looms over a major U.S. tourist spot, filling the air with choking smoke. And from Tokyo's famous Shibuya crossing to the remotest Okinawan island, Japan's streets have one thing in common: Tenji blocks, yellow textured paving squares to aid people with visual impairments. Rescuers combed through the catastrophic damage Hurricane Ida did to Louisiana a day after the fierce storm killed at least 2 people, stranded others in rising floodwaters, and sheared the roofs of homes. The city of New Orleans was still mostly without power over 24 hours after Ida slammed into the Louisiana coast as a Category 4 storm, exactly 16 years to the day that Hurricane Katrina made landfall, wreaking deadly havoc. Take a look.
Almost the entire southeastern part of our state is without power presently. And sometimes you hear it, a million people without power. It's about 1.1 million homes and businesses. It's well over a million people. I don't have a precise number for you. And we've talked about electricity, we've talked about water. It's pretty clear that if you have evacuated, now is not the time to return unless and until your parish informs you that it is okay to do so. Businesses aren't open, stores aren't open, schools aren't open, and quite frankly, we need to put as little demand on our water systems and on our electric grid as possible.
I lost my truck yesterday. I flooded out on 51. We're just trying to pick up a little things here and there, but I'm glad we made through it,
We were there at it was 10 o'clock at night, and all of a sudden the water just started rushing into the house, and so we were panicking, and my grandparents live right here, 2 houses down across from us. So we were panicking, we got all of our clothes, we packed as much as we can.
2 deaths have been confirmed as crews began fanning out in boats and off-road vehicles to search communities cut off by the hurricane. Images of people being plucked from flooded cars and pictures of destroyed homes surfaced on social media, while the damage in New Orleans itself remained limited. Ida, which was downgraded to a tropical depression on Monday, knocked out power for all of New Orleans, with more than 1 million properties across Louisiana without power, according to outage tracker poweroutage.us. President Joe Biden declared a major disaster for Louisiana and Mississippi, which gives the states access to federal aid. Let's listen in.
More than 5,000 members of your National Guard have been activated from Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and Texas to support search and rescue and recovery efforts. And FEMA has prepositioned literally millions of meals and liters of water. They're already prepositioned, as well as other resources in the immediate area. And we've deployed more than 200 generators. So I've asked the Federal Aviation Administration to work today with Louisiana and Mississippi electric companies to authorize the use of surveillance drones to assess Ida's damage to energy infrastructure, while ensuring those flights do not disrupt aerial search and rescue operations. So this morning, the Federal Communications Commission has worked with the cellular providers to initiate their cooperative framework agreement. That agreement allows customers on one line with one provider to go to another provider if that provider's down. So it allows customers to use roaming access carriers to any of the carriers that are up and running. And that means you should be able to get a signal no matter who your carrier was or is.
Now, one person was killed by a falling tree in Prairieville, 60 miles northwest of New Orleans. The Ascension Parish Sheriff's Office said a second victim died while trying to drive through floodwaters in New Orleans, that according to the Louisiana Department of Health. The memory of Katrina, which made landfall on August 29, 2005, is still fresh in the state, where it caused some 1,800 deaths and billions of dollars in damage. The National Hurricane Center issued warnings of storm surges and flash floods over portions of southeastern Louisiana, southern Mississippi, and southern Alabama as Ida travels northeast. The storm system is expected to track across the U.S. all the way to the mid-Atlantic through Wednesday, creating the potential for flash flooding along the way. Scientists have warned of a rise in cyclone activity as the ocean surface warms due to climate change, posing an increasing threat to the world's coastal communities. Meanwhile, thousands of people were ordered to evacuate as a huge wildfire loomed over a major U.S. tourist spot, filling the air with choking smoke. The Calder fire has already torn through more than 270 square miles, razing hundreds of buildings. On Monday, it was roaring towards South Lake Tahoe, the main resort town in the popular holiday area that straddles the California and Nevada border. The western U.S. is burning at an alarming rate, with over 2,700 square miles blackened by late August in California alone, more than double the area consumed by this time in an average year. The fires are being driven by a historic drought that has left swathes of the region parched as man-made climate change takes a visible and painful toll, and people living in the area are forced to flee. The Calder fire began on August 14 and quickly spread through the El Dorado National Forest. Smoke from the blaze has been threatening tourist spots around Lake Tahoe for a week now, filling the air with a choking haze. The blaze is one of the scores across the region that are stretching the resources of local firefighters. Further north, the huge Dixie Fire has ripped through more than 1,000 square miles in the 6 weeks since it erupted. Gulf cities such as Dubai are known for their scorching summers, but experts now are warning climate change could soon make parts of the fossil fuel-rich region unlivable for humans. Daily temperatures in the coastal metropolis regularly top 40 degrees Celsius or 104 degrees Fahrenheit for several months of the year and are exacerbated by high humidity. Take a look.
Weather here in UAE is every day different. Sometimes it gets 45, sometimes it gets 49, sometimes it goes above 52. So we have to work no matter what temperature it gets every day, because when we come out of our rooms, we prepare ourselves, our body, our mind, that we have to work in the heat. So we have no other choice except working in the heat. Our target is to take only one break in the day, and that is in the middle of the day when we get really tired and when we need to eat. So we keep drinking water oftenly. That is what keeps us hydrated. Because of this heat here, like it gets 50 plus, around a little bit below 50. Of course, I want to change my job. I want an official job. I mean, inside the offices or some kind of that. But I have tried many times to get a job in the inside, but I could not.
A new report this month by the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change showed unequivocally that the climate is changing faster than previously feared, and because of human activity. Even now, Dubai residents often leave for cooler climates during the hottest months, while many who stay spend their time scurrying between air-conditioned locations or rely on delivery drivers for a panoply of services. The UAE is also one of the world's most arid countries, and for the past several years, it has used aircraft for cloud seeding to artificially produce rain. The combination of heat and relative humidity has the potential to be deadly if the human body is unable to cool off through sweating. Scientists have calculated that a healthy human adult in the shade with unlimited drinking water will die if the so-called wet bulb temperatures, or TW, exceed 35 degrees Celsius for 6 hours. It was long assumed this theoretical threshold would never be crossed. But U.S. researchers reported last year on 2 locations, one in the UAE, another in Pakistan, where the 35 degrees Celsius TW barrier was breached more than once, if only fleetingly. Meanwhile, floodwaters rose Monday across northeastern India, where hundreds of thousands of people are stranded on the roofs of their homes or have fled to higher grounds as more torrential rains fell. Incessant downpours for more than a week forced the Brahmaputra and other major rivers to burst their banks across Assam and Bihar states. Up to 2 meters or 6.6 feet of water has submerged many villages. Experts say annual floods which hit the region are getting worse because of climate change. At one dam, authorities released water, fearing the walls would collapse. The floods have also threatened a UNESCO World Heritage listed reserve that is home to the largest concentration of one-horned rhinos. Tens of thousands of people are stuck in villages cut off by the floods, and the state government said more than 400,000 had been moved to higher grounds. The Bihar government, meanwhile, opened up the Valmiki Gandak Dam, warning people in nearby villages to move away after 16 centimeters or 6 inches of rain fell in 24 hours. About 70% of the 430 square kilometer or 166 square mile Kaziranga National Park in Assam is now underwater, threatening its rare one-horned rhinoceros as well as elephants and wild boar. In other news now, the hardline Islamist Taliban celebrated their total return to power on Tuesday with gunfire and diplomacy after the last U.S. troops flew out of Afghanistan to end their 2 decades of war. The United States' longest military conflict drew to a close on Monday night when its forces abandoned Kabul's airport, where it had overseen a frenzied airlift that saw more than 123,000 people flee. Take a look.
I'm here to announce the completion of our withdrawal from Afghanistan and the end of the military mission to evacuate American citizens, third country nationals, and vulnerable Afghans. The last C-17 lifted off from Hamid Karzai International Airport on August 30th, this afternoon, at 3:29 p.m. East Coast time. And the last manned aircraft is now clearing the airspace above Afghanistan. Back into your question, on the last airplane out was General Chris Donahue, the commander of the 82nd Airborne Division, and my ground force commander there. And he was accompanied by our Charge A, Ambassador Russ Wilson. So they came out together. So the state defense team came out on the last aircraft and were, in fact, the last people to stand on the ground, step on the airplane. Look, there's a lot of heartbreak associated with this departure. We did not get everybody out that we wanted to get out. But I think if we'd stayed another 10 days, Louis, we wouldn't have gotten everybody out that we wanted to get out. And there still would have been people who would have been disappointed with that. It's a tough situation. But I think what we'll do is we will work with the Taliban and work with the next government of Afghanistan, whatever his characterization is going to be, in order to ensure that our citizens are protected and that they have an opportunity to leave. As you know, we still hold a variety of significant leverage over whatever future government exists in Kabul. And I have no doubt that the Department of State will fully exercise that leverage.
Hours after the final foreign forces flew out of Afghanistan, a group of Taliban leaders walked victorious through the airport, flanked by their elite Bandri 313 guards to inspect what had been left behind. Taliban spokesman Zabihullah Mujahid, tipped to be the Minister of Information when a new government is named, led a group of officials onto the runway, his usual stoic expression replaced by a broad grin. The Special Forces unit posed for pictures brandishing U.S. M16 rifles and flying the Taliban's white flag. The atmosphere was one of triumph and victory, but all around was evidence of the chaotic withdrawal of U.S. troops after a 20-year occupation and the hurried evacuation of more than 120,000 people fearful of the Taliban's return to power. Across the runway on the military side of the facility, dozens of planes stood empty, wrecked by American forces in a final act before they flew away. U.S. Central Command Head General Kenneth McKenzie said 73 aircraft were demilitarized or rendered useless before American troops wrapped up the 2-week evacuation. He said the Pentagon, which built up a force of nearly 6,000 troops to occupy and operate Kabul's airport when the airlift began on August 14, left behind around 70 MRAP armored tactical vehicles, which can cost up to $1 million apiece, that it disabled before leaving, and 27 Humvees. Before the last U.S. troops left, they disabled scores of aircraft and armored vehicles, as well as a high-tech rocket defense system at the airport. Now, other invaders to Afghanistan will face what the United States has faced today. That is according to the Taliban spokesman Zabihullah Mujahid during a press conference on the tarmac of Kabul airport hours after the last U.S. troops left the country. However, the Taliban have repeatedly promised a more tolerant and open brand of rule compared with their first stint in power, and Mujahid continued that theme. He said, "We want to have good relations with the U.S. and the world. We welcome good diplomatic relations with them all," he said. Mujahid also insisted Taliban security forces would be gentle and nice. Many Afghans are terrified of a repeat of the Taliban's initial rule from 1996 to 2001, which was infamous for their treatment of girls and women, as well as a brutal justice system. The UN Security Council adopted a resolution on Monday requiring the Taliban to honor a commitment to let people freely leave Afghanistan in the days ahead and to grant access to the UN and other agencies. Talks are ongoing as to who will now run Kabul airport. Now, U.S. President Joe Biden said he would address the nation on Tuesday in Washington as his critics continued to savage him for his handling of the withdrawal. But Biden's top diplomat, Secretary of State Antony Blinken, was able to offer little more than stern words for the Taliban. He also said the U.S. is committed to helping every American who wants to leave Afghanistan. Take a look. The Taliban may reimpose its more extremist ideas and try to stop Afghans from leaving after the U.S. completed its withdrawal. That, according to Raffaello Pantucci, a senior fellow at the S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies in Singapore. The U.S. military has completed its withdrawal from Afghanistan to end a brutal 20-year war, one that started and ended with the hardline Islamist Taliban in power, despite billions of dollars spent trying to rebuild the conflict-racked country. Take a look.
Afghanistan's link to the world is incredibly important because, it is incredibly aid dependent, and that aid comes from foreign countries, and managers and other people need to oversee the delivery of that aid. And they're the ones who are really going to be using this airport. Otherwise, you have to use very complicated land links through very dangerous parts and remote parts of the country to try to get to the capital. So it's very important that Kabul airport is opened up again to help the Afghan economy get moving. And we don't really know what's going to happen next. Sort of as the media's glare slowly pulls back from Afghanistan and it sort of moves down the ranks of, issues in the news order, I think you'll start to see them starting to reimpose some of their more extremist. I think you're going to start to see a real emphasis being put by the government on trying to figure out ways of, through either coercion or or intimidation of some sort to try to get people to stay. Because I think a lot of the people who are probably leaving are, the managerial class, the kind of people who actually help run the country. And if the Taliban doesn't have any of those people left, they're going to really struggle to rebuild the national. You can see that the organization probably hasn't shed many of its fundamental ideas. And will continue to be pretty, fundamentalist in its outlook, but at the same time is being pushed by the pragmatic necessities of governance to actually trying to, figure out some sort of political accommodation. So at the moment, we don't really know much more than we knew before, frankly. But I think what we can see is an organization edging forwards, trying to figure out how it is going to rule the country. Context: if we continue to see a lot of people congregating around Kabul airport, if we continue to see internationals occasionally appearing there, and potentially even seeing flights, I think the Islamic State will have an invested interest in trying to attack it once again, because if the airport does get moving again, it will be the beginning of some sort of recognition that the Taliban are able to govern the country. And the IS will want to continue to undermine the Taliban's authority. And so targeting the airport would continue to make sense. Having said that, there are many other targets that the Islamic State could try to go for. So it's not clear to me that the airport will be the same kind of a obvious target or most obvious target than that we had previously when you had the sort of glare of international media on it. Now I think you'll see a more diffuse threat picture from the Islamic State in particular in Afghanistan.
Meanwhile, armed Taliban fighters appeared on Afghan's TV screens as backdrop to a political debate program where a presenter interviews an official from the Islamist hardliners. Take a look.
The
moment, as you can see, a terrified Afghan TV news anchor reads out the headlines while surrounded in the studio by armed Taliban fighters. This disturbing footage from the TV network Peace Studios' Pardas program was widely shared on social media and showed, as you can see, our TV host going through his presenting duties under the watchful gaze of gun-wielding Taliban soldiers behind him. In the clip, he tells the people of Afghanistan not to be afraid despite two armed Taliban fighters being stood over his shoulder. The video footage was shared by BBC journalist Yalba Yakim. The show was broadcast a few days before the U.S. completed its military withdrawal from the country, leaving the victorious Taliban with complete control after the 20-year conflict. And the news continues here on Eagle News. We'll be right back.
This portion is brought to you by North Luzon Express Terminal.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Sila ang mga kinikilalang bayaning may mahalagang papel para makamit ang kalayaan at pagbabago sa Pilipinas. Pero sa panahong ito, may mga bagong bayaning nakikipaglaban sa sakit na lumaganap sa buong daigdig, ang COVID-19. Ang ating mga frontliner, gaya ng healthcare workers, mga doktor, nurses, medical technologists, at iba pang health professionals, mga pulis, sundalo, security guards, mga tauhan na nangangalaga sa seguridad at mahahalagang pangangailangan ng bawat komunidad. Ang mga bagong bayani, ating pasalamatan. Kilalanin ang kanilang sakripisyo at serbisyo para sa lahat.
The country will have to deal with as much as 20,000 daily cases of COVID-19 before reproduction rate eventually slows down by the middle of September. That is according to Octa Research. Octa Research fellow Dr. Guido David said in the Laging Handa briefing that the spike in cases is due to the highly transmissible Delta variant. He added that the effect of lockdowns won't manifest at once. Take a look.
Alam kasi natin, base sa history, sa mga nakaraan na lockdown natin, pag nagkaroon tayo ng lockdown, hindi naman agad-agad bumababa yung bilang ng kaso. Usually mga 3 to 4 weeks bago natin nakikita yung pagbaba ng bilang ng kaso. Pero nakikita natin, bumababa yung tinatawag na reproduction number o yung hawaan ng mga tao. Ngayon, nakita naman natin sa Metro Manila, bumababa yung hawaan. Ibig sabihin yung reproduction number nasa 1.47 na. Dati nasa 1.0. So malaki na din binaba niya. At nakikita naman natin, maaaring umabot na siya sa less than pagdating ng kalagitnaan ng September. By mga September 13 to 14, based on our projections, baka bumaba na to less than 1 yung reproduction number. So ibig sabihin, bababa na yung hawaan or bababa na yung bilang ng kaso pagdating of September. Pero sa ngayon, dahil hindi pa siya bumababa less than 1, tumataas pa rin yung bilang ng kaso pero bumagal na yung growth rate na tawag o yung pagtaas ng bilang ng kaso. Pero sa ngayon, dahil umabot na 90,000, makikita natin maaaring lumagpas pa yan ng 20,000 cases per day sa buong bansa.
Makita natin from other countries, mahirap lang nila i-manage, lalo na kung walang strict compliance with minimum health standards. May bagay po yung ECQ natin, na pabagal din. In fact, yung pagbaba ng hawaan, yung reproductive number natin, malaking factor sa pagbaba niya yung 2-week ECQ natin po. So, yung MECQ, sana humostay niya yung downward trend sa reproduction number. Ang importante dito sa mga kababayan natin, hindi ho pwede talaga magpabaya, mag-compare sa panahon ngayon. Kasi talagang nakakahawa itong Delta variant. And ang suggestion nga namin, kung hindi naman talaga kailangan lumabas, huwag na lumabas. Ang importante, kung kailangan lumabas dahil sa hanap buhay, siguraduhin natin, sundan natin yung minimum public health standards, pagsuot ng face shield, face mask, pag-iwas sa mga malataong lugar, yung pag-practice ng social distancing, pagbubugas ng kamay. Doon ho sa aming bagong survey, sa SecMark, nag-survey kami noong July 12 po, yung bagong tugon ng masa survey, ang nakita namin, nag-decline ho talaga yung practice ng minimum public, yung frequency ng pagsuot ng face shield, face mask, pag-social distancing, pagbugas ng kamay, yung mga practices line ho from January to July po. Nakikita natin, ito is isang area to na kailangan natin improve yung compliance. Pangalawa po, yung ating MECQ medyo maluwag, sa iba kailangan natin higpitan ng konti, lalo na yung pag-force ng minimum public health standards. Importante ho talaga na yung ating hospital capacity, lalo nito sa NCR zone, sa Central Luzon, sa places like Rizal, ay augmented, tulungan natin sila kasi ayun nga, yung sinasabi, yung bagong bayani natin, yung ating mga healthcare workers, they need help at the moment. So kailangan ng augmentation, whether it's equipment, pati personnel.
Staying in the country, Bureau of Quarantine Director Roberto Salvador Jr. confirmed the implementation of the use of the One Health Pass for travelers and returning overseas Filipinos beginning September 1. Let's listen in.
Opo, malaking tulong po ito sa mga kababayan natin na uuwi dito sa Pilipinas. Ang purpose po talaga nito is ma-decrease po yung inconvenience ng mga kababayan natin uuwi dito. Ang One Health Pass po ay ino-automate po lahat ng proseso. Ang gusto po natin sana ay paperless na from the point of origin po mag-register na sila doon sa electronic health declaration checklist. And sa pamamagitan po ng pag-register ng isang registration lang po, dire-diretso na po ito na maipapasa sa lahat ng mga ahensya na tumutulong po sa pag-aasikaso sa mga kababayan natin umuwi sa Pilipinas, tulad po ng OWA, ng Department of Tourism, ng Marina, ng PCG at ng OSS. So, ito pong mga informasyon ng mga kababayan natin na i-register nila doon pa lang sa point of origin, magagamit po ito para po continuous na maipasa ang mga informasyon, magamit po ito kaysa hanggang makauwi sila doon po sa LG. Madali po, user-friendly po talaga ang One Health Pass po. More on information lang po talaga, kaya ang ilalagay ninyo, personal details, yung flight details, kaya dire-diretso na po yung registration. Pagdating po sa Pilipinas, once na meron na po kayong QR code, automatic na po, unang step natin is i-check kayo ng Bureau of Quarantine. So once na may QR code po kayo, titignan lang po, i-scan. Pag meron na po, kay step 2 na po tayo, punta na po tayo doon sa orientation area natin. Kung saan, andun po yung OWA para sa mga balik manggagawa natin, sa mga OFW, andun po yung Marina para sa mga seafarers natin, and andun po ang DOT para po dun sa mga non-OFW natin. So ganun din po, i-scan lang po, paperless po dapat tayo. Kaya pagtapos po doon, diretso na po sila sa Bureau of Immigration para magkaroon ng clearance. Then, diretso na po sa hotel. So, after po ng hotel, depende po doon sa classification nila kung 7, 10, o 14 days sila maka-quarantine. After po ng maswab sila, and ma-release po yung quarantine certificate, kinu-communicate din po ng One Health Pass sa mga LGU yung data na mayroong mga ganitong dami ng mga Pilipino na uuwi doon sa locality nila. So from start to finish po hanggang mauwi natin ng ligtas at maayos yung mga kababayan natin sa locality nila. Dapat po within 3 days po before kayo mag-travel sa Pilipinas, mag-login na po, mag-fill up na po doon sa www.onehealthpass.com.ph natin para makakuha kayo ng transaction number. Then 24 hours po or pag nasa airport na kayo, bago po mag-check-in, bago mag-board, dapat po i-fill up naman yung electronic health declaration checklist. Ito po yung nagsasabi kung kamusta po yung pangkalusugan natin, yung health status natin. So doon naman po sa mga hindi marunong or hindi gaano techy or hindi gaano po nagkakaroon ng problem sa pag-log, pwede po sila magpa-assist dun sa mga airline staff natin.
Meanwhile, Israel on Tuesday recorded its highly daily coronavirus case tally of nearly 11,000 new infections amid a surge caused by the highly transmissible Delta variant as schools prepare to reopen. The previous high came on January 18 with 10,118 cases. Despite Tuesday's 10,947 confirmed cases, Israel is pressing ahead with plans to fully open its school system on Wednesday as it tries to boost vaccination rates. Prime Minister Naftali Bennett, a critic of the cycle of lockdowns implemented by his predecessor Benjamin Netanyahu, has maintained that the surge can be controlled through inoculation and protective measures such as masks. His government has encouraged all residents aged 12 and above to get a third jab of Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine. About 60% of Israel's 9.3 million residents have received 2 shots of the vaccine, including 80% of adults. Israel was in December one of the first countries to launch a national vaccination campaign, which brought daily infection down to a trickle and allowed the lifting in June of nearly all pandemic restrictions. Several measures have since been reimposed, including indoor mask wearing, limits on gatherings, and the need to present proof of vaccination for entry to certain facilities. And the global fight against the coronavirus pandemic is now dominated by the battle against the Delta variant, a more contagious version of the COVID-19 coronavirus. The World Health Organization fears that the pandemic could kill an additional 236,000 people in Europe by December 1 and has expressed concern about the stagnating pace of vaccinations on the continent. Take a look.
We now have 64 million confirmed cases and 1.3 million deaths. 33 member states report a greater than 10% increase in 14-day case incidence. This high transmission is deeply worrying, particularly in the light of low vaccination uptake in priority populations in a number of countries. Several countries are starting to observe an increased burden on hospitals and more deaths. Last week, there was an 11% increase in the number of deaths in the region, with one reliable projection expecting 236,000 deaths in Europe by December 1st.
Clues stress that since public health and social measures were being relaxed in many places, the public's vaccination acceptance is crucial. Europe has already registered around 1.3 million COVID deaths to date. First, EU Chief Ursula von der Leyen said 70% of adults in the European Union are now fully vaccinated, reaching an end-of-summer target the bloc set for itself in January. As schools reopen, take a look.
Today, we reached an important milestone in our vaccination campaign. 70% of adults in the European Union are now fully vaccinated. And that is more than 250 million people who are immunized. And this is a great achievement, which really shows what we can do when we work together. But the pandemic is not over, and we must remain vigilant. So first of all, we need many more Europeans to vaccinate rapidly, to avoid a new wave of infections and to stop the emergence of new variants.
Brussels has stressed the need for the EU to reduce the worrying gap in vaccination rates between member states and urged national authorities to be ready for the injection of a new dose to boost immunity if scientific data confirm the need for it. And the news continues here on Eagle News. We'll be right back.
Malalayong lugar ang kanilang narating para maghanap buhay. Tulungan ang pamilyang iniwan sa sariling bayan. Yan ang ating mga overseas Filipino worker. Pero dahil sa di pangkaraniwang pangyayaring hatid ay krisis, may ilan sa kanilang nagpasyang umuwi. Pinagyaman ang sariling lupain, nagtayo ng negosyo na kasama sa puhunan ang sipag at tiyaga. Ang mga OFW, maraming sakripisyo, ninanais maging kapaki-pakinabang maging sa kanilang pagbabalik bansa. Sapagkat ang ating mga bagong bayani, Pilipino pa rin sa puso at damdamin.
Start your day right! Tara na! Simulan na ang excitement and happiness kada umaga.
May pera sa basura, lalo na kung magagawa ang iba't ibang bagay mula sa mga recyclable material na inaakala ng iba na itatapon na. May ilang barangay sa bansa ang nagre-recycle ng basura at makikita ang iba't ibang bagay na gawa sa basura. Dekorasyon sa bahay. Sa mga proyektong ito, nagiging malinis ang kapaligiran bukod sa mayroon pang pagkakakitaan.
Iba't ibang sakuna at kalamidad ang nararanasan ng bansa. Kapag may banta ng panganib, kailangang maging alerto at kung kailangang lumikas ay magtungo sa ligtas na lugar. Bilang paghahanda sa mga ganitong pagkakataon, mahalaga na may gobag na dadalhin ang pamilya. Narito ang dapat na nilalaman ng gobag ng isang pamilyang handa. Mahalagang dokumento sa selyadong lalagyan, flashlight, kandila, posporo at silbato, radyo na may bago at ekstrang baterya, first aid kit kasama ang panlunas sa lagnat, LBM, sugat at iba pa. Ang mga gamot na regular na iniinom ng pamilya. Magagamit para sa mga sanggol, bata, matatanda at may kapansanan, pera at mga barya. Pagkain na madaling ihanda, di na kailangang lutuin at sapat para sa 3 araw. Inuming tubig sa saradong lalagyan at sapat para sa 3 araw. Telepono, power bank at charger. Lubid, lumang dyaryo, matitibay na lalagyan, damit, kapote, bota at mga sanitary supplies, sleeping bag o banig at mga kumot. Suriin ang mga laman ng gobag kada 3 buwan at palitan ang mga laman nito na malapit nang masira. Ilagay ang gobag sa lugar na madali itong makita at makuha sa oras ng sakuna.
China's ambassador to South Africa accused the U.S. intelligence community of political manipulation after a report in which Beijing was accused of withholding key information about the origins of COVID-19 pandemic. Take a look.
Like all countries in the world, China is a victim of COVID-19. And we all hope to identify the source of this virus as soon as possible and stop its spread as earlier as possible. It's important for the international community to join hands to fight against not only COVID, but also the political virus. We need to jointly oppose the self-serving actions of the US through political manipulation. Origin tracing is about science. No country has a right to disregard life, politicize scientific issues, and smear other countries for political interest.
President Joe Biden said Friday that China was withholding critical information on the origins of COVID-19 after the U.S. intelligence community said it did not believe the virus was a bioweapon but remained split on whether it escaped from a lab. The U.S., however, does not believe Chinese officials had foreknowledge of the virus before the initial outbreak of the pandemic that had now claimed 4.5 million lives, according to the unclassified summary of an eagerly awaited intelligence report. Quarantine restrictions and the weak recovery of the economy in the second quarter would allow the economy to post a maximum GDP growth of 5% this year, that according to a local think tank. In its latest market call report, First Metro Investment Corporation, University of Asia and the Pacific or FMIC UAP, Capital Markets Research said growth this year at best could reach 5% or lower by year-end. The think tank said the 11.6% GDP growth in the second quarter brought some optimism, but on a quarterly basis, growth still contracted at 1.4%. With the rise in COVID cases due to the new variants circulating in the Philippines, FMIC UAP Capital Markets Research said economic gains in recent months could be diminished. These gains include job generation in June, when 361,000 new jobs were created. When employment declined, so does income, which could lead to lower consumption, the economy's primary growth driver. Russian IT giant Yandex said it had reached a $1 billion deal to buy out ride-hailing service Uber from several joint ventures, squeezing the U.S. company out of ex-Soviet markets. Under the deal, Yandex will buy Uber's stake in their shared food delivery operations and a business that develops self-driving vehicles, gaining 100% ownership. Yandex will also increase to 71% its stake in transport ventures with Uber, including taxi and car-sharing services, with an option to purchase the remaining shares for up to $2 billion. The transactions will be completed by the end of the year, Yandex said. Uber and Yandex had combined their ride-sharing businesses in Russia and neighboring ex-Soviet countries in 2018. Frequently dubbed Russia's Google, Yandex started out as a leading search engine and developed into one of the country's greatest tech success stories. The New York-listed company dominates Russia's IT sector, taxi-hailing services, and food delivery operations with its army of bicycle couriers and multiple warehouses known as dark stores. Yandex's food delivery services skyrocketed last year after the outbreak of the coronavirus pandemic drove Russian cities into lockdown. Meanwhile, China announced a drastic cut to children's online gaming time to just 3 hours a week during term time, the latest move in a broad crackdown on tech giants in the world's biggest gaming market. Gamers under 18 will only be allowed to play online between 8 p.m. and 9 p.m. on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays, according to state news agency Xinhua, in what it described as a bid to curb addiction in the gaming crazy nation. Gamers are required to use their ID cards when registering to play online to ensure minors don't lie about their age. On school holidays, children will be allowed to play a little longer with the allocated time set at 60 minutes per day. Gaming addiction has affected studies and normal life, and many parents have become miserable, the National Press and Publication Administration said in a statement. Companies are prohibited from offering gaming services outside the stipulated hours, although the statement did not make it clear how rule breakers would be punished. In July, Chinese tech giant Tencent rolled out a facial recognition midnight patrol function to root out children masquerading as adults to get around a government curfew on underage gamers. From Tokyo's famous Shibuya crossing to the remotest Okinawan island, Japan's streets have one thing in common: Tenji blocks, yellow textured paving squares, to aid people with visual impairments. The tactile paving was invented in Japan more than 50 years ago to help those with visual impairments move smoothly and safely around urban environments. Take a look.
いわゆる点字ブロックっていうのは大きく言うと2種類あります。で、どっちの方向に進んだらいいかっていうのを方向を示す誘導ブロックっていうのと、あとはこの辺がもうじき信号ですとか建物の入り口ですとか、あるいは駅のホームの端っこですっていうようなその危険な場所ですとか注意してほしい場所を示す警告ブロックですね。
And they have gone global over the years, becoming a familiar sight in cities from London to Sydney. Yoshizumi, who lost his sight at age 12, commutes about 40 minutes every day guided by tenji blocks named for the Japanese word for braille. The tiles typically found at railway station platforms, pedestrian crossings, and in front of public buildings are usually yellow, which is often said to be the easiest color for the visually impaired to see. They come in two types: squares with long raised parallel strips tell pedestrians they can proceed safely and keep them following the road, while those with raised bumps indicate a change of direction or stopping point like an entrance, or a possible danger like a platform edge, staircase, or traffic light. While the blocks help keep pedestrians safe and on track, they don't give much more information, including which direction a person is headed. But an app launched this year aims to address that, with QR codes pasted onto blocks in several Tokyo stations, which pedestrians can scan for spoken information, including directions and distance to their destination. With this app, users can choose destinations such as specific exits, toilets, and train cars. So far, QR codes are available at 9 Tokyo metro stations, and the company hopes to see the project expand. German sprinter Felix Streng stormed his way to Paralympic gold in the T64 100 meter in Tokyo on Monday, dethroning British rival Joni Peacock, who ended up sharing the bronze after a photo finish. Take a look. The track thriller saw Streng finish in 10.76 seconds short of the Paralympic record he set just a day earlier in heats, but ahead of Costa Rica's Sherman Isidro Gitti, who took silver. After several tense minutes, the decision came back a shared bronze, with both Peacock and Germany's Johannes Flores coming in at precisely 10.78 seconds. The pair beamed as they received their flags to join the other medalists. The race was one of the last on the sixth day of competition in Tokyo, with records again tumbling from the track to the pool. And that's it for tonight's broadcast. Thank you all for joining us. And at the end of the day, there remains so much more to be grateful for. I'm Alma Angeles. We'll see you back tomorrow. We live in interesting times. Good night.